Hello, everyone, and welcome to TGTT, or Two Guys Talk Tech. I'm Dan Jones, your host, and next to me is...
I thought I was the host.
My sub-host, my assistant on the show.
Sub-host?
Yeah, sub-host, assistant.
Who has the experience in the industry? Who you want to count up the number of hours we've both been on camera doing this type of work?
Yeah.
I think I would eclipse you quite thoroughly.
So those of you who watch the channel know Jacob. He's been on a lot of our first looks, and you did the Windows video lately, and quite a bit
Some
of
other new
stuff.
stuff.
Yeah. So Jacob Jones, my co-host here. So what are we talking about, Jacob?
Oh, you're not going to say
No, I figured I'd let you tell us what we're talking about.
Who are you?
Oh, I'm not going to tell who I am. I said Dan Jones, but I am the president and CEO of Newsmakers Network, and I don't admit this often. It's going to be on camera now, but I'm his father.
They can probably get that. It's
Yeah,
like if we were in a police lineup and one of us did it,
the other one could be. Yeah. What I find fun is when we're at trade shows and people are like, "Are you guys brothers?" That always makes me feel good and makes me wonder how old you look then.
I think it's probably more you look young because you're way older.
Yeah, well, way older.
Older.
All right, so what are we talking about?
We're going to be, since it's the first episode,
It is.
We're going to provide a lot of context because oftentimes your experience and your opinions on technology are based on your history with
Your experience.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're going to go over and just talk about how technology has impacted our lives leading up to somehow sitting behind a desk and discussing it.
So I thought the way that we can get started is talking about our own personal history with tech. Obviously, we're going to focus a little bit more on the PC and computer side because that's what we do a lot of. But, there's other forms of tech that we can, delve into a little bit.
Consumer electronics can be very interesting.
Absolutely. So I'm going to start with the first computer that I remember using. And for me, the first computer I really remember using on like a continual basis, not just like a one-off, is an Apple IIe. The school that I went to...
I was going to say, was that a school thing? Because, they were super popular in schools.
Super popular in school. And one of my favorite stories, the classroom had a 2 Plus with the 2 single drives on the side. And the teacher gave me a 5 1/4-inch floppy, said, go put this in. And I put it in sideways and could not figure out why it wasn't turning on.
What do you mean sideways?
Like, sideways.
Oh, okay. I gotcha.
Like, not the right.
That sounds like something I'd do.
Yeah. And, I don't know, because the label, you would think that, that would make sense to insert it, straightforward. I don't know why.
I did that all the time as a kid with VHS tapes. Not sideways, but, reversed.
Upside down? Or you mean like with the little
180.
How?
I don't know. I was a kid.
Did you break them?
I don't know.
Maybe. I don't recall you breaking
so.
any, but who knows? That I don't know how you would do that.
Jam it in, punch it.
So, what was the first computer you remember using on a more than one-off basis?
It was when I was a little kid, and me and my brother had a bedroom on our first floor, so you can place this. Mm-hmm. And we had a computer in it, which was one that you had, I don't know, probably one you had thrown together to play games on.
I gave you guys a computer in your room.
Yes, which
I did not. What was I thinking?
I did not have spend much time on it, I mostly remember playing Sonic.
So the computer for you right away was a way to play games.
Yeah. My childhood usage of computers is, like I say, Sonic was the first thing I really remember playing on computers. Mm-hmm. But at least 80% of my hours on computers were playing edutainment stuff.
You mean like NFL math, like we just found in the
yeah, I've
the
never
archives
played
here?
that, but those type. I don't know why, but I was born in '96, so that like period in the late '90s when CDs were the form of media for all your games and whatnot. The edutainment industry was huge.
I think it's interesting, though, that you say, obviously I know when you're born in 96, but you missed out on so much of the revolutionary tech time for PCs, because by 96 it became a very evolutionary process of, this processor is faster than last year's.
Right. By that point, there are commodity boxes. There are beige boxes that, it didn't matter really what was inside them anymore.
Right. Right. And, I think the fun thing for me is watching you interact with all these retro computers that we have now, which is, right around 100 of them that we have in our collection, because you weren't around when most of them were new.
Right. One thing which I've described to you is the technology gap, as I call it, which is your generation, the Gen X or whatever.
The old people.
Yeah. You grew up as these revolutions were happening, right? So you were able to pretty easily learn BASIC first and then maybe go into, I don't know, QBasic and then move your way to big boy languages, right? And then the kids now, there are so many great resources for them to learn, and their teachers are coders, and you can go on, I don't know, name a website, Khan Academy right now, and you can learn how to program from it easily.
Right.
But when I was in school, there was nothing.
No, and most of your instructors had no clue.
Right. It was too late for us to learn it ourselves and too early to be taught it.
That's a good point. So I'm going to start with you this time. What was the first computer that you actually owned yourself?
Owned myself? Mm-hmm. That wasn't until after I graduated high school and I built one for myself. Because everything else was a family PC as a kid.
So let me ask, is that the one you still use?
Yes. It's had a couple upgrades since then. So that was about 5 years ago or so that I built it. And it's starting to show its age, but it's, I use that mostly for gaming. And it can still mostly max out games at 1080p.
See, what I find fascinating about it, though, is I rarely have a computer that stays with me longer than a year, maybe 2.
Right.
And the fact that you've had one and it stays with you for 5 years is very different than my experience.
The only thing that's really changed on it is storage. I had the SSD and it die on me, which was a shame, but it was a cheap SSD and, that's a gamble.
Well, and SSD technology has gotten better since.
It's so much better since then, and so much cheaper. It's insane. The drive I bought, I want to say it was the late 2014, early 2015 that I bought it.
And you probably bought a drive on clearance.
It was on sale. It was a 120 gigabyte hard drive, and it was like $90. Right. And then cut to now, you can get a 500 gig if you search for that price.
Right. Well, I mean, the 1 terabytes are currently, like around 200?
Right.
Yeah. All right. So my first computer that I owned was one that you just did a first look for, a very similar, same computer, not the exact same one, but it was a Coleco Adam.
What's so funny about that was I wrote the script for it, and if you don't know, the Coleco Adam's kind of one of the biggest flops in computer history. If you don't know, you should go watch the video on that. It's, I think, pretty good, but I wrote it, and but
you're a little biased with it.
Yeah, I am a little biased, but it was so fun because when we'd have conversations, I'd say, let me remind you about this thing that was terrible about your first computer.
So let me tell the story a little bit about that. I was pretty young. I don't remember the exact age, but my cousin had bought it and didn't understand it. He was not a computer techie kind of guy. He just wanted to play games, didn't understand how it worked at all. And he was like, I hate this thing. So he went to my father and said, hey, I want to get rid of this. You want to buy it? And my dad, again, was not a techie. He was like, no, but my son would probably like it. Now, he met my brother at the time. Mm-hmm. So he bought it, we brought it home, hooked it up. My brother used it maybe once, And he's like, yeah, this is not for me. And to this day, I don't think my brother's a tech person, really. And I'm like, I got this. And it became mine real quick. My memory of it, and it's been a while. I mean, we're talking 30 plus years. But my memory of it was the printer was where the power supply went. So you had to plug the printer and you had to use it, no matter what. And if I remember correctly, it was it Daisy Wheel?
Yeah.
Yeah, Daisy Wheel. And it just was terrible. And then the second big memory I have of it was playing Buck Rogers on cassette.
Which was the pack-in game with it.
Yeah.
The game you got
Yep.
for free.
Yep, because we had a whole bunch of the ColecoVision games that we could play with it. Like I had Mousetrap, which you played with the little buttons on the Coleco, the 1 to 9.
The number pad.
Yeah, the
phone
number pad. Number pad. I could not think of the right word there. And it was a hard game actually to play. But I remember hating Buck Rogers, not because of the game, even though I vaguely remember it and I don't think it was that good, but you'd have to sit there and listen to the cassette drive, rewind and play and rewind and play and fast forward and play. It was the most painful thing. And, my experience with computers before then was using, the Apple IIs with a 5 1/4 inch drive. So I was like, why would anyone use a cassette as a storage medium? It just drove me nuts. Now, I guess, and you would know this more, Coleco did make a 5 1/4 inch drive.
They did.
Atom later, right?
But it was expensive and, like the computer itself, notoriously unreliable and prone to hardware issues.
And we wonder why that failed.
Yeah. You mentioned that you had ColecoVision software for it, which I think is the
Cartridges.
Right. The biggest saving grace for the computer is that it can play ColecoVision stuff, because the ColecoVision's a really awesome console.
Well, I think that's why a lot of people actually migrated to it. I think if you were to go back and ask people, why did you buy an Atom? It's because, well, I already had a ColecoVision, I had the games, and it's a logical progression from the game console to a computer. And they're like, well, I can still use all these games on it, which, in hindsight is probably a really dumb reason to buy a computer, but, it worked at the time.
Right. And it's amazing that companies, especially in the 80s, did not grasp the concept of backwards compatibility. No one did.
What was there to go back to?
Right. That's fair.
There wasn't much history.
But I mean, like the Commodore 64, no hardware compatibility. Well, no software compatibility, not hardware. With the VIC-20, which is a huge loss, I think, because the VIC-20's got tons of cool software.
Well, okay, but in order to do that, they probably would have had to build a whole VIC-20 computer inside it.
Well, it's got the same processor. It doesn't have the video chip, but most of the rest should work.
But if you think of the way programming was done back then versus now, you didn't have an abstraction layer. You didn't have a whole bunch of APIs that you just tie into. You had to actually, write machine code to talk to these things and such. It was not an easy process.
All right, my turn. So professionally in your job, you're a man of many, many hats.
Yeah.
But one of your primary jobs is programmer.
I would say that my primary job is not programming. I happen to be one of the programmers for our online marketing service, ReleaseWire. But that's not my primary job. I don't even get near much time to actually code anymore.
So the question is, what was your first experience with programming?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I learned to program first in BASIC, and
it's such a shame that BASIC died out, because I think a lot more people of my generation, would have benefited from it, because it's so simple and easy to understand. Even an idiot like me can do it.
Right. Well, maybe you. So a little bit about my history. I used to program in BASIC, and in the mid-'90s, I ran a company that made bulletin board software. For those of you people who are too young and interested in RetroTech because you're young like Jacob, bulletin boards were the predecessor to the internet, where you would actually use a telephone modem to dial into the service and interact with it like a web page. So my business partner and I wrote bulletin board software, and we wrote what are called doors. Doors were online games that tied in to the bulletin board. I wrote most of my doors in BASIC originally, and eventually progressed to Pascal and wrote most of the software in Pascal for quite a while. Then, the transition to Windows, we did a little bit of Delphi, which was the kind of Windows version of Pascal. And then I kind of got out of programming for several years because I had someone else to do that. And then later came back into it on the website with PHP, MySQL, and JavaScript. And that's kind of where I've been ever since is, Java, JavaScript, PHP, all, web-based technologies.
So the charting of the evolution of technology for me is very much tied into school. You mentioned using an Apple II in school.
Mm-hmm.
By the time I was a kid, it wasn't a weird thing, to have computers in school. It was a normal everyday thing. And I can chart it out by what version of Windows we used,
The fact that you guys used Windows, though,
Right.
It's interesting even now because most of the kids in school don't use Windows. They're doing Chromebooks now.
Right.
So, even they're getting a different experience than you did.
Oh, definitely. I mean, most or a bunch of schools they hand out iPads.
Right.
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 The first computers I used in school, they were Windows 95 computers, and then that was weird because it was already 98 or 99, probably. Well, I was born in 96, so when I was real little, right?
Right.
But I guess they never made the upgrade to 98 and also skipped ME. They went to...
Well, it's probably a good thing they skipped it.
Yeah. They went to Server Edition 2000.
So doing like a thin client?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they had that in... Because I was in the same school district my entire school life, but different schools.
Right.
But it was all unified. And they had that for years upon years. So
Did they do Max 2 or no?
No, none. And then they upgraded to Windows 7. You figure they went from Windows 2000 to Windows 7 9 years later. So I'm very familiar with that OS, and whenever I see it, I think of, being in school. And then that was really the last OS. And then when I was in high school, they started integrating Macs.
Why?
Uh,
I'm going to get some hate mail, but I'm not a huge Mac fan.
I honestly don't know because most of the labs were Windows computers, but like they had one specific lab where they all
It was probably
used
like
iMac.
for designers, like they probably did their graphics design classes with them, I'm guessing.
That's what I used them for. But what was funny was...
Wait, I'm sorry, stop.
Yeah.
You did graphic design classes?
One. We did courses essentially on, the Adobe suite.
Right.
Primarily Photoshop, but a little bit of Premiere and a little bit of... And I did not take to any of them. I have, to this day, never really edited a single video, but I know the work that our editor puts into it.
Oh, we have a great editor here at Newsmakers, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. Shout out to Micaiah there.
Oh, she's named now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, she does a great job for us here.
Oh, but last thing about that. The funny thing was they also had like a CAD design, a 3D animation class.
Like 3D Max?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they tried initially doing that on the Macs, and the IT guys for the school district got so fed up with it, they just gave us all HP workstations instead.
So, kind of an interesting segue there. What computer do you use on a daily basis now? And I know that we said that you still have the same computer.
Yeah, but that's my personal
That's your computer at home.
Right, which my girlfriend ends up using more than I do.
Right.
And that sits in my living room, and then I have a home office, which is where I do most of my script writing, because I don't live here. So I come down.
You don't live in a studio here?
Well, sometimes it feels like that, but I come down here every couple of weeks to record, and before then, when I'm at home, I bulk write and research and do all that. And that's a pretty new thing for us, so I'm still getting used to it, but I have an HP laptop that, like most of my work computers, have been hand-me-downs from you.
Yeah, that's kind of the way it works. I get the new stuff, you get the whatever I'm with. Yeah.
And I really like that computer. It's a shame because it's a laptop, so it's not all that upgradable. But when you did buy it, it must have cost quite a bit.
Yeah, it was a i7, right?
Yeah, the actual 4-core, 8-thread i7, and this was 3rd gen Intel, which is, I didn't even know they made those for laptops, you know.
And the one thing I remember about it is it had that battery that bulged out and kind of became like a little ledge.
Yeah.
Which I've never seen in any other laptop.
It's pretty cool. I like it. So I spend most of my time using that. The one thing is, you know, I don't see all the best, right? So I will not use laptop screens for anything.
See, I'll use them, but I use them with the convertible ones that turn into a tablet. And
Yeah,
I can use them that
that's
way.
fine. But using the actual laptop screen to get any work done past, you know, a quick edit or two, I'd rather just plug in a monitor.
Yeah, the point where we had LCD screens and LED screens that are 27 inch, because that's kind of what we standardize here. Widescreen 27 inch, it changed productivity like crazy.
Right.
I mean, the fact that you can have that much screen real estate, and they have the ultra wide ones now, which I have not played around with much, but you know, you can pretty much put everything on one screen now. Or you can be like our editor here and have two and want a third.
Yeah, I'll stick to one.
I could see the benefits of having multiple screens.
I
depending on
think-
your workflow.
My workflow is just not one I needed. It's generally very linear, you know?
Right.
But I see the benefit anytime I'm swapping back and forth between a press release I'm reading from the 80s and my notes. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, 2 screens would be nice here, but I prioritize desk space.
Well, yeah, that's a lot of the thing for me with the multiple screens is it clutters your desk.
So I guess ultra wides for the win?
I have to get one and try it. So my current computer is a HP Z6 workstation, and I kind of went all out on this thing. You know, multiple Xeon processors. What is it? 32 or 64 gigs of RAM. It's a ridiculous number. More SSDs than I can count in the thing for storage, and they're in RAID arrays. I wanted something to where I can be doing my programming and rendering a video in the background and editing a video at the same time, just switching between them if I needed to, plus running everything else I do. And the one thing you can vouch for is I have a habit of having way too many browser tabs open and windows open.
I have never seen someone have that many. And it's not like, oh, I have a lot of tabs open in Chrome. No, it's I have 50 tabs open in Chrome, 75 in Firefox.
True.
80 in Vivaldi, and I've got 3 windows of that.
Right. Yeah, it's very true. And the reason for that is typically what happens is I get started on a task and then get pulled to another task, and I leave that tab open until I can actually complete that task. Well, I just went today and looked back at some of the open tabs, and I'm like, wow, I don't even remember when I opened this tab and why.
See, I'm very much once I get past like 10 tabs, I'm like, that's too much. I need to cull it a little bit.
Right.
You know, my personal computer, since I never shared anything actually about it, for my friends out there who care about specs, I have a GTX 960, which is still chugging along. I have a Intel Core i5 4440.
So why'd you go with an i5 and not an i7?
Budget. It wasn't that I didn't have money to spend to upgrade to anything higher. I set a specific price point for when I built the computer, and I prioritized the graphics card over the CPU.
So your first computer that you own, not one that was given
Yes.
to you by me, you built.
Yes.
And there's something to be said about that. I mean, right now I have an HP workstation that I did not build, but our storage room is littered with computers that I've built over the years. What do you think of the experience of building your own computer?
I think it's a really fun, satisfying experience with a couple of snags.
Okay.
I think one big problem is for the novice computer builder, the pin headers that you have to plug in for all your front case stuff.
Hate those.
Impossible.
Right.
And I really hope that in the next couple of years, case manufacturers figure out a way to like just use like a single USB-C port for that instead.
If you ask me, everything should be moved to the USB-C.
That would be super cool.
I mean, it's the easiest connector to put in. You can't put the wrong way.
And what's funny is when I built my computer, I did tons of research on what I wanted, and I laid out my parts in PC Part Picker.
Right.
And I sent it to you to see your thoughts
And
on it.
what was my first comment?
Your only criticism was that you wanted me to have more RAM.
Yeah. And do you agree with that now?
Mostly. It's kind of that odd point where, because I originally had the 8 gigs, and I did go with the 16.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never used the full 16, but I've certainly bleeded over the 8.
You'd be surprised how many times it uses RAM that you don't realize.
Right.
So, let's do this sometime. Let's challenge you. Let's have you take it back down to 8 and use it for a month and see how much you...
What's fun is I've got a whole bunch of other sticks now at this point.
Right.
I've got 1 gig sticks. We could use 2,
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if you come back saying, I'll never do that again.
What was cool is a couple weeks ago at a local thrift store, I found a package of RAM. And I'm like, that's weird. And it was only a couple dollars, and I bought it. And it was, because my system's DDR3, right? It was DDR3, 1866 megahertz, which is very fast for DDR3.
Right.
Really nice sticks.
And you got
metal
how much?
shrouds. It was like $6. And it was 32 gigs of the stuff.
See, that just blows my mind. I remember back in the 90s, I worked for CompUSA, and we had a client who ordered a 16 gig or 16 meg chip, and it was ridiculously expensive back then. And just, it blows my mind that when we talk about memory, it's so cheap now. When I used to own a computer store in the late 90s, memory was very volatile as far as pricing. One day it'd be X price, the next day it'd be through the roof, next day it'd be through the floor. And I remember we used to have to sit there and guess, when do we buy memory? And we'd have our vendor calling us up and say, memory's at a great price right now, you should really get in. And we'd be like, yeah, okay. And then the next day everything would drop like a rock, or and we'd end up with memory that was worthless because we paid so much higher than what it was going for. Or the other case is, we didn't buy memory, and all of a sudden there's, a factory in Taiwan that gets destroyed, and prices
Oh, yeah.
through the roof, and we can't get more memory.
Look what happened to graphics cards a couple years ago.
Oh yeah, that really killed us because we needed graphics cards here for our editors, and we could not get them for a while.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, without paying ridiculous amounts.
Exorbitant prices. I was lucky when I bought mine because that was a good deal of time before then. But then I was tempted because even the mid-tier graphics cards shot up. So I'm like, well, I could just sell my graphics card and live with potato for a while and get a... Because, I bought the thing new for like $200, and here it is selling used for like $400.
I want to go back to our history a little bit because we really
we
have
got on
gotten
a tangent.
and that's going to happen. What is the computer that you've used that you dislike the most?
Can I just say all Macs?
No, you
No.
can't do that because
No,
they're
that's
not all awful.
I actually like Macs for basic web browsing or whatnot. Anything more than that's a hassle, though.
Well, yeah. I mean, for me, it's like I use Linux daily, so it's like using a Mac is kind of using a limited version of Linux in my view. But
My mom had this computer. It was like it was not all that long ago. It was like 2013, 2014, and a tech repair store guy, friend of hers, threw it together from spare parts to give her as just hey, you need an extra computer for your kids to play with or whatever, and it was terrible. It's 2014.
How terrible?
It ran Windows XP in 2014. But it should not have ran Windows XP because it was far below the specs for it. It barely ran the operating system, and everything crawled on it.
That sounds awful. So my worst computer is actually one that is somewhere in this studio right now, and it was a personal. Well, I built it myself, and the specs were great. It is a i7 Sandy Bridge
Oh, that one.
with the original motherboard, not the revised motherboard, with the fatal flaw in the disk controller, where eventually the disk controller dies no matter what. And they had offered, it's an Asus motherboard, and they had offered replacements, but the timing made it to where I just couldn't get to it in time. And I ended up with this motherboard. Now, here's the thing. Sandy Bridge came out when? Like,
Oh, jeez.
I mean, it's been years and years because we're up to, I don't even know what generation. it is.
Ninth?
Okay.
And that's second.
That's second.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's been at least 8 years. At
Probably
least.
2007 or 8 is my guess. I'm sorry if I'm wrong.
Right. But here's the thing. That computer was used up until 1 week ago. And let me tell you what happened a week ago. We just recently moved into our new studio here. It's much expanded and a brand new construction. We love it. We brought
Still some growing pains.
oh, definitely. This particular computer had been used as our audio recording computer, and we've been using it for the past 3 years with no problem in the studio in our old location. We brought it here, and the hard drive controller completely failed, and the computer's dead. So for me, when I say it was the worst computer, yeah, it worked for years, but there was always that threat of one day it's going to be dead.
Yeah.
Now, granted, it gave me a lot longer of a span than I expected, but it was always hanging over my head, so you never wanted to use it for anything mission critical because you're like, well, one day it's just going to die and you're going to lose.
You have
it.
to reuse that case for something because it's a super nice case.
Yeah, that's graphite, is it?
I don't know.
Corsair. It's a nice case.
It's-
I mean,
it's-
even in today's style.
Yeah. Although you can tell it's old. It's got eSATA on it, and no USB 3 on the actual case itself.
But it has
I knew it.
it
Go
has
for it.
a USB-C pigtail or USB 3
Yeah.
pigtail that comes out of the back that you have to plug in a weird way to get support for USB 3 on the front. I don't even remember. It was really weird. Something I've never seen before.
It's always fun when you have like a new piece of technology and, in order to incorporate it, it's kind of jerry-rigged.
Right. It's like,
it.
it was right at the beginning of USB 3, and they're like, well, we don't know where we're going to put it, so let's just, give you a little cord hanging out the back. All right. Well, I think we've covered some of our computer history. Didn't get as far as I wanted because there's so much to talk about, but we'll have more episodes like this. So for those of you at home, if you want to see more, go to tgtt.show and make sure to subscribe and all that YouTube-y stuff that you tell people to do every episode. And we have a Discord server as well, right, Jacob?
We do, and that's at newsmakers.tech/Discord. And you should join that and let us know what you want us to talk about in future episodes. We can talk about us for days, but
Yeah, we're good at that.
we'll talk at a bunch of other technology topics as well, current events, maybe specific ecosystems or environments, or
Yeah,
just
we're always open to new conversations, though. So please join the Discord and let us know what you'd like to see.
yeah.
All right. Any final thoughts?
On to greater things.
Oh, that's so wow. I don't even know what to say to that. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.